Season might be over, but we still have a lot to talk about, especially with how the Blue Jacket season went. So today we're going to be talking goalies, and more goalies with the help of some handy-dandy stats graphs that a friend of the show and a listener put together. So that is what's coming up today on Locked On Blue Jackets.
Locked On Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Blue Jackets. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster. Glad to be here with you, even though we are not talking about playoff hockey like many of the other Locked On shows. I still think we can have some fun right here, especially because, as I mentioned at the top of the show, today we are talking all about goalies. So before we get into all of that, I want to thank everyone for making this your first listen of the day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and also on YouTube. So I do recommend, if you are not watching this episode, then heading on over to YouTube and watching it, because we are going to be having some visual aids with today's episode. I've got some handy graphs and charts and whatnot. They look a little bit scary, but it's okay. I am going to talk everybody through them. And if you're not subscribed over on YouTube, then please go and hit that button, because I appreciate it. And I appreciate you for stopping on by. So let's get right into it and talk a little bit about some context for the goalie thought that I've had this season, because I feel like basically for Elvis's entire time as a Blue Jacket, there's been a lot of talk about the Blue Jackets play differently in front of Elvis that they do in front of Korpisalo. And I feel like even way back when it was Bobrovsky and McElhaney, I feel like there was a very kind of overt feeling about how the fans thought that the team played, and there was a very different, and I'm guilty of this as well. I thought there was a very different vibe between how Bobrovsky played, or how the team played in front of Bobrovsky, rather, versus how the team played in front of McElhaney, and then in front of Korpisalo, and then obviously with the departure of Bobrovsky, the introduction of Merzlikins, that really only seemed to get more pronounced among the fan base, especially as, they started off with, we're going to have a 50-50, we're going to have a 1A, 1B tandem, and then obviously Elvis started performing better, ended up getting a bigger extension, and then ended up getting that long-term extension, which basically kind of put the writing on the wall for Korpisalo. Without wanting to get into too much detail, obviously the goaltending pipeline in Columbus has changed dramatically over the last year. So I don't think it's as clear to me personally whether Korpisalo is going to be a Blue Jacket honestly, maybe by the draft. He might get shifted, he might get moved in free agency, or I don't know what's going on. But the point is, there has been this persistent rumor across all of Blue Jackets fandom, and all of I think the media has been kind of not complicit, but I think they tend to buy into this kind of thing as well, of Elvis's numbers are better because the team plays better in front of him. And I don't know where this rumor started, and I don't know why this rumor started, but that seems to be kind of what I see a lot of, well, Elvis isn't the better goalie, he just gets better defense in front of him. And so this is something that has kind of been really interesting to me, as I have kind of dipped my toe into the advanced stats world. I know just enough to make me dangerous. I've had a couple of stats people on the show. We've talked to Alison Lucan, now with the Seattle Kraken, about kind of the importance of stats versus the eye test and how to make stats accessible. We've talked a lot about specifically the Blue Jacket stats and some concerning areas and some not so concerning areas with Micah McCurdy earlier this season. But this is something that I have kind of been wanting to look at, but have lacked the tools and the ability, and also, frankly, the time. So now that the season is done, I was talking to a friend who I believe listens to the show, so shout out to Ria, who put these charts together. And she has done a really good job in kind of taking a look at this Blue Jackets season, looking at how the team has performed in front of their goalies and how the goalies have performed as well, and kind of how basically are we is it confirmation bias that the Blue Jackets play better in front of Elvis than they do in front of Korpisalo, and kind of unpacking that a little bit, and also kind of just looking at some typical defensive trends for the team this season, because we went from 2 years ago, I think the Blue Jackets very quietly had one of the best defensive groups in the league. With the top four of Savard, Gavrikov, Werenski, and Jones, and then when your third pairing is Nunavara and Ryan Murray, who were both very young and very promising at the time, obviously no longer with the team, and Ryan Murray, especially, I think, has struggled this season to stay in the lineup with. I believe it was the Avalanche now, and that tells you something. If I'm like, I'm not sure where Ryan Murray is, but they've gone from having a quite good, quite experienced blue line to having, that's been the joke all season. It's Zach Werenski and some children. And obviously with Zach Werenski being in and out of the lineup, that veteran role has kind of fallen by default to Vladislav Gavrikov, who has, I think, 202 NHL games. And that makes him the veteran. And this is not an episode about defensemen, so I'm not going to get too deeply into that. But I believe the same friend and listener of the show, Ria, looked into kind of the average NHL games of the Blue Jackets defense core with Gavrikov and Werenski, and without either of them, and it drops to, like, I think the average without Gavrikov and Werenski in the lineup, I think drops to, like, I don't know, an average of like 70 something games, which is just bananas, honestly. So I think that's a big, and you can't like look at the goaltending without looking at the defense, because they are kind of two very symbiotic relationships. But this episode, which we'll start looking at the graphs in the next segment, because I've accidentally talked for too long about some context here, but that's fine. Basically, I wanted to take to kind of sum everything up that I've just said. I wanted to take a look at how this team has performed overall defensively throughout the season, and how they have performed versus or while they're playing specific goalies. So I wanted to look at how the team does with Korpisalo in net versus with Elvis in net, and also because Jeff Brube had a handful of games in there. Daniil Tarasov also had like 2.5 games, so we're going to look at that. However, small sample size, etc. But I do think Tarasov, especially, I think there is a really promising. There's a very promising beginning there. So as we're going to look at in a minute, is we're going to look at some broader team strokes of goals allowed against, goals for, things like that. So that's what we're going to look at in a minute. But first, I've got to tell you all about Rock Auto Cars. With an increasing number of makes and models of cars, it's basically impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why would you endure pointless or intimidating questioning, wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing the only brand that their warehouse happens to carry? You've got to leave your car there, or you've got to take it home and then take it back in and then pay for the labor and then go back and get it. Like, it's a whole shenanigan. You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket, so why don't you just stay on the couch? You can save time and money when using rockauto.com. They are a family business. They've been serving DIYers and professionals for over 20 years. And it doesn't matter who you are, their prices are always reliably low. And they have everything that you could need, from brake parts to tail lamps, motor oil, even things like new carpet. If you can put it on or in your car or truck, rockauto.com almost definitely sells it. So go explore the easy-to-use website today to find the solution to your auto part needs. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. You can write "Locked On" in there "How did you hear about us" box, so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. So here's where the show is going to get a little crunchy, but I promise, stick with me. It's not nearly as complicated as I will make it sound. So we're gonna start off with, just like I said before the break, some more like general trends for the team. So we're going to look at their Corsi for percentage and their expected goals for percentage. And this is only at 5-on-5, so this is not taking into account the power play or the penalty kill, which is good because both of them were garbage this season. However, the bad news is they were not great at 5-on-5 either. So let's pull up my first little. Okay, so you'll see here the red lines are Corsi for percentage. I assume you all know what Corsi is, but if you do not, there is no shame. We are a no judgment zone here. Corsi is basically every puck that goes in the direction of the goal. So Corsi is all shots on goal, blocked shots, and shots that miss the goal. So shot attempts basically is what Corsi is. And you want your Corsi for percentage to be over 50%, ideally much over 50%, because otherwise it's just basically you're getting beaten on possession. It's a slightly more crunchy way of saying shots on goal. If you're getting out Corsi'd, then it's chances are you're being outshot as well. Expected goals for percentage is basically the percentage of goals that you are expected to score. And I don't know enough about stats to really kind of get into the nitty gritty of what exactly that means and how it's calculated. But once again, if you are expected to score a lot of goals, then your expected goals for percentage will be high. A team that is very, very offensively gifted will have a very high Corsi for percentage and also a very high expected goals for percentage. So if you are kind of looking at this graph, what you will immediately see is, well, almost all of these dots are below that 50% line, and a significant number of these are the expected goals for does not match the Corsi for percentage. So in some examples, it's very kind of clear that the Blue Jackets have been outpossessed in a solid, I would say, 60 to 70% of the games, which is not a great start. So even before we look at the defense, clearly the Blue Jackets are doing something wrong offensively, and a lot of teams, if they are struggling defensively, then they could combat that by basically outscoring the opponent. We've kind of seen that with Florida this season. Obviously, the Florida Panthers have been very, very good. Bobrovsky has been very good. However, the Florida Panthers have essentially outscored every opponent that they've had to. And the Blue Jackets just haven't been able to do that. And so that's kind of what this first graph shows. And that is the first little bit of context that I will give you for this. The second little bit of context is we're going to look at expected goals for. Okay, so the graph that I'm showing you right now is kind of a continuation of the last one, but this one looks at expected goals for versus expected goals against. And, just like expected goals for, expected goals against is basically how many goals are you expected to allow in a game. And once again, it will not surprise you that the Blue Jackets were expected to allow a ton of goals. The one thing I will say about this chart is that it is inverted, so the lower, the better for the red line, which is the expected goals against. You want to allow less goals. You want to get close to the 0 on the bottom of the chart. For the blue line, the expected goals for, you want to be higher. You want to be up towards that 5. You will notice there are many, many games. Let's see, there are at least 5 games where the Blue Jackets were expected to allow over 4 goals per game, which is not great. And then something else to kind of look at this is these dotted lines in the middle, where you'll see that the dotted blue line, that is kind of the averaging out of the expected goals for over the season, basically stays the same. So the Blue Jackets offense did not change. It was inconsistent, you can see, because the line kind of does this and goes up and down and up and down and up and down, but the overall average basically stays where it is, at just under 2 goals per game, is how many goals they were expected to score, which is not how you win a lot of games, frankly, especially when your average goals against, the average is about a quarter of a goal higher at the beginning of the season. So they already kind of started on a downward trend, and then it finishes almost half a goal expected higher. So by the end of the season, the average was the Blue Jackets were basically to call a spade, they were scoring on average per game 2 goals. They were allowing on average 2.5 goals. Now, again, I'm not super up on the stats, but that is not great. And so all of this kind of combines together. Stop sharing that. All of these stats kind of combine together to basically give some context for the Blue Jackets were a very, 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 very bad possession team this season. And that's not even getting into the goaltending, which we talked a little bit on Monday about. Well, the Elvis was not as good as a lot of people thought he was going to be. I don't think he was as good as he thought he was going to be. And then, it came out at the end of the season. Well, obviously he's dealing with all of this, trauma and grief and etc. Not to etc. away trauma and grief, because they're both incredibly important things. And obviously they have affected him very deeply, as they should. But without even getting into the goalie individual performances, like these metrics are looking at how good this team is. And the Blue Jackets this season just were not a very good team. And when they were a good team, it wasn't consistent. It wasn't sustainable. It was, randomly allowing 9 goals in one game and then beating a team 6-0 2 days later. That was kind of the story of the Blue Jacket season. It was big, big highs, big lows. In a minute, we're going to get finally into kind of the goaltending specific part of the episode. I know that I said this was going to be a goalie episode. I am getting there, I promise. But first, I've got to tell you about Built Bar, because summer is coming, and with summer, you're going to need some food on the go. I myself am going to be doing a charity hike in the summer, and you better believe I will be filling my backpack with Built Bars. They are super portable, they are delicious, they are nutritious. You don't have to sacrifice taste for health. With Built Bar, you can have both. All you have to do is go to built.com and order now. All Built Bars and their Built Puffs, which are a protein-infused marshmallow, which, a protein-infused marshmallow, honestly, sounds incredible. I'm all about that. You can pick any flavor you want, or you can get a mix box, which is, you get 12 random flavors. You can pick your favorite and then go from there. But here's the best bit. If you go to built.com, use promo code LOCKED15, you can get 15% off your order. Once again, that's built.com. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. That's what I will be doing, and hopefully that's what you will be doing as well. And honestly, maybe the defense on the Blue Jackets would have been better if they'd had some Built Bars. Seems unlikely because, as previously mentioned, the defense was made up entirely of children. So we're going to talk a little bit now about specifically goalies. So I will pull up my third handy-dandy chart of the episode, which is going to be this one. And what this one will show you is each color is a different goalie, and we're looking at the minute at goals saved above expected across all situations. As you can see, again, this is definitely one of those games or charts where you look at it and you're like, oh God, I don't understand everything. So we'll break it down. Red games are Elvis. Blue games are Korpisalo. The green games, the little of them that there are, is Tarasov. And the purple games are Berube. You can see, again, there are a couple of instances where, for example, the last game of the season, you'll see where both Berube and Elvis played, because Berube got pulled 7 minutes in. And again, what you'll see is inconsistency is the word of the day, word of this episode. Elvis specifically Elvis, I think, was more inconsistent than Korpisalo, because unfortunately, you can see Korpisalo was consistently not very good. You can see there's a lot of very bad games in Korpisalo's season. Elvis had some very bad games. He also had some pretty good games. What I like to see, though, what is pretty encouraging is from about the it's kind of hard to tell here, but like the last kind of quarter of the season, I would say, when they started saying, well, we're going to play Elvis for basically every game because Korpisalo is getting shut down for hip surgery. So after the overtime loss to the Wild, where Elvis did not play, well, he played fine. His goals saved above expected was minus 0.73, which means he allowed almost three-quarters of a goal more than expected, which is not, the end of the world. From there, he was, I thought, pretty exceptional. He had a couple of rough games. The game versus the Isles, he allowed 2 goals more than expected. The game against the Tampa Bay Lightning, the first one near the end of the season, he allowed, again, about 1.5 goals more than expected. But then you look at for example, the Kings game, which the Blue Jackets lost 2-1. Elvis saved almost 3 goals more than he was expected to save. So, that's the kind of game where you look at a game and go, right, okay, well, clearly the goalie did everything he could here and just couldn't get it done, or the skaters couldn't get it done, I should say. So the other thing I want to focus. Well, okay, just to kind of summarize that a little bit. Again, the name of the game, inconsistency. The Blue Jackets were inconsistent this season. So were the goaltenders. And there are some games where you can see that the goaltenders kind of let the skaters down, and then there are games where the skaters let the goaltenders down. It's a rough world out there to be a goalie. But something else that I wanted to kind of focus in on as well is, again, very small sample. Danil Tarasov, who I believe came in relief in his first game, played basically no minutes, played extremely well for his second 2 games, allowed half a goal less on average than he was expected to, did not get a win. And then obviously that third game, that was the Hurricanes disaster where the Blue Jackets were up 4-0 and then allowed 7 goals after Ranta left with an injury, and then Tarasov left with an injury, and it all just kind of fell apart. But I think the context there is that the future is looking pretty bright for Tarasov. Obviously, being shut down with hip surgery, not great, but hopefully he can come back and show the Blue Jackets and show the fans and show me that, yeah, he can be a very good NHL goalie, because I think he has it in him, especially when you look at his stats here compared to his stats in the AHL, which were not great this season. And again, I want to say, obviously, very small size sample, but there is definitely some promise there, I think. And so that is kind of to say, man, the Blue Jackets goalies just, again, inconsistency. I don't really have another word to say about it. But I do want to go basically immediately onto the next slide, which kind of talks a slide. This is not a PowerPoint presentation. What am I doing? The next graph here, which kind of talks about, are the skaters letting players down? Are the skaters letting the goalies down, or are the goalies letting the skaters down? And again, this is kind of a chaotic graph that it's tough to figure out, but to kind of sum it up for you, the answer is no, everyone was kind of incompetent this season. And I also think it's important to note that if you follow specifically the red and the blue, which again is red is Elvis, blue is Korpisalo, there's a lot of zigzagging up and down, up and down. And I don't think, there is not a clear path of, well, the Blue Jackets played much better defensively in front of Elvis, and that's why his numbers were better, because they didn't. That's just not how the season went, and I think I can see why people would think that, but it is simply not true. So that's just kind of a brief ending to kind of debunk the Korpisalo is getting shafted by this team rumors. He shafted himself this season, which is maybe unfair to say because, again, the Blue Jackets were universally very bad in their own zone, but I don't think it's fair to say that Elvis was only good because the team helped and Korpisalo was bad because the team didn't help, because obviously it's just not the case. I am going to finish with just one final graph because I think it, again, just kind of really sums up Blue Jackets season. So this is a graph that shows how they played against every other team. You can see that it's got the logos of the team and then the score next to it. The Blue Jackets spent a lot of time in the dull portion and the bad portion. They had a surprising number of above average competent games. They did not have a lot of fun games, which is upsetting because that's kind of what I was hoping to go into this season was I wanted fun. Which I think is not to say that the Blue Jackets did not have a fun season, because I really enjoyed this season. And, we talked again on Monday about how a lot of the Blue Jackets in their media availabilities were like, this is the most fun I've ever had playing hockey. I love this room. I love this team. I love this city. But in terms of like quote unquote fun on the ice, fun in this event, in this context, kind of means high event. So if lots of goals were being scored on both sides, then that's fun. Data speaking, personally, I like it when there are no goals scored by either team, but that's a me thing. Maybe that's a goalie thing. I don't know. However, I think this again just really kind of serves to show that the Blue Jackets, again, super inconsistent. They do kind of cluster together a little bit on that league average axis between dull and competent, but mostly they kind of are all over the shop. And thus ends my sermon on how the Blue Jackets are not throwing Korpisalo to the Wolves. And also a little bit of a sermon on how the Blue Jackets are doing in terms of goaltending. And that's kind of all I've got for you today. Hopefully that wasn't too crunchy. Please let me know if it was, and I will do better next time. I've been Jay Foster. You can find me on Twitter at LO_Blue Jackets. Nope, that's the podcast Twitter, but you can also find me there. You can find me at the handle down below if you're watching on YouTube, which again, I hope you are, because lots of visual aids in this, lots of screen sharing. And honestly, I don't think this podcast will be very good in its audio format. So do with that what you will. Thank you once again for making this your first listen, or your first watch, or your second watch, or your third listen, whenever you are listening to this, watching this. I appreciate you. Thanks for stopping on by. We'll be back tomorrow, and we're going to do a little bit more talk about the season as a whole. I think we're going to give out some superlatives. So MVP, unsung hero, my totally unbiased favorite player, like best newcomer. We'll do a bunch of things like that. It'll be fun. We'll get you guys to vote on them over on Twitter. And so that's going to be tomorrow's episode. If you have comments, questions, criticisms, you can email me at lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. And until tomorrow, make sure you stay locked on.